But let me welcome on board now and talk about Moody's, which expects India's economy to now grow at 6.5% through 2027. The ratings agency has said in a statement, in fact, they flagged off support from robust infra spending and solid consumption, although the private sector they remain cautious. So let me take that conversation forward. We've got Kristen D. Guzman, the Senior Vice President, Moody's Ratings, joining in on the show right now. Kristen, great to have you today on ET Now. How likely do you think is India to surprise on the upside where GDP growth for calendar year 25 and 26 is concerned?
Our projections of around 6.5% growth over the next 2 calendar years does assume that there will be a continuation of the tariff uncertainties related to the United States. In addition, we have some pretty conservative assumptions with regards to investments. Particularly, we have noted the sort of lackluster private investment in India over the past couple of years, and we do think that that will continue, or at least we assume that that will continue to some extent. So, with regards to upside, could we then see a deal struck with the United States that facilitates faster export growth than what we are assuming? Could there also be scope for the private sector to finally start investing in the Indian economy in a big way, complementing some of the infrastructure investments that the government has been pushing these past couple of years? So there is indeed some upside, but at the same time, I would say that there would also be some downside, just given the broader uncertainties in the global environment.
Okay, and what are the levers likely? Hi, this is Harsh here. What are the levers likely that will drive growth? Give us a sense on that.
I would just start out by saying that the headlines that are around India have been fairly negative over the past few months on account of the tariff situation with the United States. However, we don't think that this will significantly impact Indian growth in the same way that it would have impacted other Asian peers, which are much more export oriented. India is a very domestically oriented economy. So with regards to our view of 6.5% growth over the next couple of years, this is going to be supported by that robustness of domestic demand, notwithstanding what's going on with the export sector. So the domestic demand is going to be supported by higher purchasing power, especially cyclically. We are looking at low headline inflation, which should improve purchasing power for the large part of the Indian population, especially the rural and agricultural parts of the population, which are more exposed to food inflation, noting that the lower inflation that we are seeing now is being driven by this record low inflation on the food part, which comprises a larger part of the CPI basket for some of these rural and agricultural parts of the population. We also see that the government will continue to be supportive of growth. The infrastructure investments will continue, as we have seen over the past couple of years. And there has been a nod to further accommodation. When at the beginning of this fiscal year, we had a consolidation of the tax slabs for income taxes, which did eliminate a tax liability for many in the middle class. And then more recently, we had the GST reform.
Right. So private sector Capex and consumption, wanted to understand what's your take on both over the year ahead?
We have assumed that there is continued lackluster private investment. This is not to say that there's no private investment. It's just that the growth in private sector investment, we have not necessarily seen that pick up in a big way over the past couple of years, despite the very favorable narrative around India. So, however, I would say that the backdrop to facilitate greater investments on the part of the private sector are there. This includes, as I mentioned earlier, favorable or accommodative RBI monetary policy, which does reflect the benign inflation outlook. And we also have the government continuing to push through with infrastructure, which should at some point start to crowd in private sector investment as the private sector takes advantage of the new roads, the new modes of connectivity, and just really the greater opportunities in terms of productivity growth afforded by the gains in the infrastructure.
And what sectors, Christian, are best positioned to surprise on the upside where India is concerned?
I think when we are talking about sectors, I think here I think we need to look at the domestic demand story in particular. We from this sort of sectoral perspective, I think we can exclude perhaps just the more export-driven types of sectors, which the government has been trying to promote over these past few years, given the sort of Make in India program. But just given those uncertainties related to the U.S. once again, we do think that that we need to be cautious in that regard. So I think we would be looking at the more domestically focused sectors, and those include those with services that are catered to the consumer, which continues to be the biggest part, private consumption being the biggest part of Indian GDP. And as I'd mentioned to you, there is a favorable backdrop given benign inflation. So I think that some of the sectors would really be that pose that upside, include services related to consumption.
Right. Christian, great to have you today on ET Now. Thanks for your perspective on where you see the Indian economy headed.